Boom. All right, so I'm just starting recording, and I'm going to start off on a whiteboard and then go to the notes. So the first thing is to remember from the last time the marginal revenue product, which is just how much each worker brings in. So let me also label. And this is the quantity. So I just paused to refresh my mind if it was quantity or labor, and it's quantity, period. Okay, so here's what's new. A monopsony hires workers from the labor market. The labor market has some labor supply. So this is the supply of labor. Here's the issue. In perfect competition, it's like this would be the equilibrium when they're willing to hire workers such that the wage nice L. The wage that the wage that workers receive is the same as what they produce in terms of revenue for the company. But here's the issue. If the firm wants to hire more workers, let's just say, for instance, you take over as the boss and you're here and you're hiring this many workers. If you want to hire more workers, how do you do it? You need to increase the wage. Sort of like the reverse of the law of demand. How do you sell more? You lower the price. How do you hire more workers? Well, you increase the wage that you're willing to pay them. But when you increase the wage of one worker, you need to then increase the wage of all the other workers. So the marginal resource cost, or the marginal cost of labor hiring one more worker, is actually higher. And that's what's new and different and a little bit hard. And this is one of the harder concepts to get over the hurdle in AP Micro. And actually, it follows from the exact same logic of a monopoly, that the marginal resource cost is higher than the supply of labor. Again, why? To hire one more worker, you have to pay more. You have to pay more than to everybody. A common question people ask is like, well, wouldn't you just be hiring that new worker and you'd pay them? But in sort of an equilibrium framework, what would happen is if I knew that the person working next to me doing the exact same job was getting paid more, I'd quit and reapply for the job. Semi-obviously, that's something that breaks down in real life, because not everybody gets paid the same, in the same way that not everybody pays the same price for an airline ticket. But in this world where all laborers are the same, there's just one wage. Again, imagine that this is the only seller of the only place that's hiring these workers. Right? This is the only place that's hiring these workers. This is that one Walmart on a long road with nothing, not other places to compete, or a tech company where it's the only game in town that people could work for, or I've used the example of aeronautics in like the greater Philly area, and it's like Boeing has that monopoly. They hire aeronautic engineers. If they want to hire another one, well, they're at equilibrium. So how do they entice more people to come work for them? They raise the wage, and the more people make that decision. So then what do they decide? They decide to work or to hire this many. And then you would think that this is the wage, but just like with monopolies, you need to then go to the supply curve to figure out. This is supposed to be a dotted line. If I can do it, good. And that is actually the wage that they have to do. The issue is, why is the marginal cost of hiring that other worker, the marginal resource cost, higher? Again, because for the $1 more they have to pay per hour, they then have to pay to all their other workers. I'm going to share now the notes. And this has the takeaways on it. So a monopsony, a single firm that has market power in the labor market. If you're the only game in town, you're the only Walmart in a huge or in a small town where there's no other places for people to work, you can name the wage that you'll pay people. I only pay $7.50 per hour. And some people will say, okay, that's enough. And some people will say no, and there it is. But if you say, I'll pay $8, more people will say, okay, I'll go work. So if you want to then increase the number of workers because everyone's made their decisions, you have to, that's this box here, to hire more workers, you have to offer higher wages, and the higher wage must be paid to everyone. The marginal resource cost is the change in cost for hiring one more worker. It's the change in cost. Why is that? Because the higher wages be paid for everyone. Each additional unit of labor adds more to the total cost than its own wage. Yes, you pay that new person, whatever, $8.10 an hour, then you pay 10 cents more to all the other workers per hour, which sets that marginal resource cost pretty high up. Profit maximization, I had just worked it out there, but the idea is the wage comes from the intersection of the marginal revenue cost and the marginal resource cost and the marginal revenue product. That's that quantity. And then from the supply curve of labor, of how much people are willing to work, that's where that equilibrium wage comes from. So the profit maximization is when they're equal. That sets the quantity, and the wage comes from the supply curve. And I wrote down here as a note, just like a monopoly. If this was on a sheet of paper, you could flip the paper up, hold it to, like, flip it over and up, look at a light, and you would see that these are actually the exact same thing. The supply curve is like the demand curve. The marginal resource cost is like the marginal revenue. And the wage comes from the supply curve, just like the price in a monopoly came from the demand curve. This is a firm that has market power in the labor market. And just to come fully, like, full circle, in factor markets, the good market could be in competition or in a monopoly. And we looked at that for each of those, how you get the marginal revenue product. We did that last time. It's just a little bit steeper for a firm selling in a monopoly. This is where it gets like a little hard to like keep things straight, but this is a firm selling. In order to sell more, they need to lower the price. They need to lower the price for all. That gets you a steeper marginal revenue product. Then for both of these, we used a an external, or sometimes it's called exogenous wage, and the wage was set in the labor market. Both of these were set in the labor market, which was competitive. That's this. So the first day we did for perfect competition and perfect and a monopoly, we looked at the marginal revenue product, how much money each worker brings in. And then we looked at, well, if the wage is given, we set those equal. A firm is, that's a monopsony, doesn't just take the wage as given exogenously or externally. This firm gets to set that wage, which is both a good and a bad thing, because again, to hire more, they have to then raise the wage. So this marginal revenue product could be from a monopoly, could be from a perfect competition. The last thing I just have down here is that shifts in the labor demand and the supply are the same as the demand and supply shifts from the goods markets. If people have a change in taste and they like not working, they like leisure time. If there's that would shift the supply curve. If there was immigration and more workers available, that would shift the supply curve. If there were opportunities in other fields, that's like substitute goods, essentially, it's like that. Those are all things that would shift the labor market. What would shift the demand for labor? Product demand, productivity of workers, better technology, worker quality, price of different resources, like how much does artificial intelligence cost? How much do computers cost? Whatever. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.